Hi, welcome to Back to Basics. My name is Girish Bali, your host for today. I have an exciting guest today regarding about stress or therapy. Depending which way and which angle do we get on this show today, we're going to talk about those two topics, and we're going to stress about it, or I should say, not stress about it. So the name of the guest is Steve Hall, MD. I should say Steve M. Hall, MD. He's an awesome guy. I spoke with him several times, and he will give a little insight about his therapy, his stress, and we're going to see where his clinic or where his um, um, helpful to people helps. I hope that makes sense, but you know what I mean. Well, we will get to Steve and we will talk to him. So, Steve, thank you for coming on this show today.
Oh, you're welcome, Garish, and thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So, Steve, so tell me a little about yourself before we get to the basics. Um, the first thing is before we get into basics, what does back to basic mean to you?
Well, it's interesting because I like the title of your podcast because one of the things I do is teach other practitioners how to do advanced craniosacral therapy,
Hmm.
and that's kind of like a body oriented psychological therapy. And sometimes when you start really getting into people's stuff, it's easy to get lost or get like forget where you're really trying to go with your therapeutic process.
Hmm.
And the advice I always give my students is if you ever feel like you don't quite know what the next question you should ask or what's going on, to get back to basics.
Hmm.
And to me, getting back to basics means getting back to the body, you know, tuning back into the body. What is the person feeling in their body right now? What are you as a practitioner working on them feeling in their body right now? and and getting back to the basics always helps to ground the therapeutic session and gets it back on track.
Mm. So, Steve, so what do you think stress mean to you?
Well, the way I picture stress is we have events that happen to us,
Hmm.
and if those events um, like put some kind of load or strain on our system,
Hmm.
that's what we call a stressor.
Hmm.
And then we all have a certain what I call carrying capacity for how many stressors we can easily manage. And some people use the image of your stress bucket,
Hmm.
and you keep putting stressors in your stress bucket. But once your stress bucket's full, that's when uh, things cross over into what I call stress.
Hmm.
So mo- stressors are inevitable. We can't escape them. Things just happen to us, right? Nobody
Hmm.
asked for this COVID pandemic, for example, but
Hmm.
we all have to deal with it. And
Hmm.
but that's a stressor.
Hmm.
As long as you stay under your threshold, though, the sum total of all your stressors won't make you sick. But once you cross over that threshold, then then stress makes you sick. And everybody's got their own threshold and might even change from day to day. Um, but the goal is to try to keep your stressors underneath that level. And so there's two kinds of stressors in my view.
Hmm.
One are the stressors that are inside your skin.
Hmm.
So like living with chronic pain or living with chronic allergic reactions that you don't know that are going on, um, like gluten or things like that, having hidden infections. So those are, I call them physiological stressors. But then there's all these stressors outside your skin,
Hmm.
like deadlines at work or traffic or relationship issues, uh, that sort of thing. And technically, none of these stressors outside your skin need to be stressors.
But Steve, you brought up a good point. How would I or my listeners or my viewers will know what what is the threshold? I mean, we or are we just saying do we listen to our bodies? I mean, how do we know that threshold?
Yeah, so there's actually lots of clues. Your body gives you clues. Um, Fatigue, tension in your chest, headaches, tension in your neck and your shoulders, Um, a lot of people get digestive problems,
Mhm.
gas, bloating, um, heartburn, those kinds of things, irritable bowel type symptoms. Um, the Or it can cause you like a mental fatigue. Um, Suddenly, things you could deal with just feel overwhelming now.
Mhm.
You might be depressed. You lose joy in things you used to really enjoy.
Mhm.
Um, Sometimes you get a short fuse
Yeah.
where you pop off and get angry more easily than you used to. Um, you snap at your kids, or so there's lots of clues. If you keep an eye on yourself, uh, you tend to get clues both from your body and then also from your responses,
Mhm.
how you react to people.
So what do you help on the stress? And I think if I'm not mistaken, you do some therapies, right? So can you
Hmm.
explain certain therapies that you offer for your clients?
Well, so when I see people one on one in the office, uh, one of my favorite therapies is called craniosacral therapy. It started as a subspecialty of osteopathy, which are the doctors that have the DO after their name.
Mhm.
And it's very subtle, very gentle. There's no popping or cracking like going to a chiropractor.
Mhm.
Um, but it's a great way for people to learn how to listen to their bodies and listen to uh, their feelings and to follow things back to their roots. So that's how I help people go, okay, so you're feeling this anxiety, you're feeling this depression. Let's follow it back to its roots. When did it very first form? And and so I found it a great way uh, to do this kind of work because if you're just doing talking therapy with someone, you don't really have feedback except for their words.
Mhm.
But when you're working on them with the craniosacral therapy, you get feedback from how their body responds.
Mhm.
And so I can usually tell by the change in a person's cranial rhythm, for example, if they're in their resistance
So
or
do you think that is your back to basic moment as to realize that you need to go to the root of a therapy instead of just saying, instead of talking it out, you want to show them.
right. And I like them to see it for themselves. I mean, I don't tell people what to think or what to believe.
Mhm.
I ask them to find that for themselves. And there's a way to help people get in touch with their own deeper knowing,
Mhm.
and they can tell when they're um, repressing something or denying something to themselves.
Mhm.
Because it turns out you can't really lie to your own deep knowing. It knows when you're
Yeah,
telling yourself the truth and when you're not.
that is true. That is
Yeah.
true. So what other therapies do you concentrate on? Is that the only therapy that you concentrate on?
No, I actually like the idea. I um, Well, just very quickly, so the best model I've found of a human being to sort of explain how it is that we work is actually the Vedic model,
Mhm.
which underlies Ayurvedic medicine and the whole yoga tradition, and and it sees a human being as made up of six aspects,
Mhm.
and five of those aspects in the Sanskrit name has the suffix Maya attached
Mhm.
to it,
Mhm.
and Maya means um, impermanent or illusion or not as it appears to be, you know.
Mhm.
And so, for example, there was a time you didn't have a body, and there's going to be a time again when you don't have a body.
Mhm.
So your body is a Maya. Well, and the sixth aspect doesn't have Maya in the name, and that's your true self,
Mhm.
and that name is Atman in Sanskrit,
Mhm.
and that's, I think, your true consciousness. That's where your knowing comes from, your intuition comes from.
Mhm.
So what I like to do is what I call support the five Mayas while you're learning how to consult with Atman.
Mhm.
And and then once you get really good at consulting with Atman, your own deep inner wisdom can tell you how best to support your body, mind, energy, belief system. Those are the five Mayas. And so that's what I like to do. And so as far as supporting the body, one of the best ways I found to do that is called functional medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And it's another name for it. It's been called integrative medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And with functional medicine, we think about your body systemically because you're not just a cardiovascular system and an intestinal system and a nervous system. You're all these things working together, working
Mm-hmm.
simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
So we take a systems view, and and then we can basically use any uh, treatment that works. So we can use lifestyle treatments, nutritional treatments. We can use herbs. We can use nutriceuticals, and then we can use pharmaceuticals and surgery. So an acupuncture and homeopathy. I basically use whatever therapy seems to fit what the person needs the most, as long as it's going to work for them.
So, Steve, there are 2 points I want to bring up. So, one, I want to tell the audience, I think the five elements that you're talking about is the air, fire, and water, and earth, right? Is that correct?
Oh,
For
the five
the
Mayas?
five Mayas.
No, they're you maybe also have heard them called koshas,
Mm-hmm.
and kosha means sheath. And so the ancient Vedic sages saw these things as like a sheath over a sheath over a sheath. I think of like those Russian nesting dolls.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so your outermost sheath is your physical body. They called it Annamaya kosha,
Mm-hmm.
and Anna means food.
Mm-hmm.
Right under that is your energy body. They called it Pranamaya kosha.
Mm-hmm.
And I bet most of your listeners have heard of prana.
Mm-hmm.
That's like your vital life energy, right?
Yeah.
And then right under that is Manamaya kosha. And manas means relating to aspects of consciousness. So we would think of that as your mind.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got your body, your energy, your mind. And then they saw that the mind had contents to it. They called that Vijnanamaya kosha, and that's your intellect.
Mm-hmm.
I think of that as your belief systems.
Mm-hmm.
you know, so if you're going to make a robot, it would have those four aspects.
Mm-hmm.
It would have a body, it would have a battery pack, it would
Mm-hmm.
have a computer, and it would have software and data programmed into the computer.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not robots. We've got two more aspects that the
Mm-hmm.
robot will never have.
Yeah.
And so the fifth Maya, they called Ananda Maya Kosha.
Mm-hmm.
And Ananda means spiritual bliss.
Mm.
And so to me, this is the most fascinating thing because we don't really have a concept of Ananda Maya Kosha in Western philosophy,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
except Emerson kind of touched into it when, like he says, you can watch your mind and you can watch your body, right? And you can actually watch your energy, although he didn't talk about that, I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
Well, who's doing the watching?
Mm-hmm.
See,
Yeah.
there's a
So.
you, right? There's a you inside of there. And
Mm.
it's not your mind. You can watch your mind. And the key is what the ancient sages saw was that it's not just any old cold scientific observer.
Mm-hmm.
It's Ananda. It's loving, it's compassionate, it's wise. And so what I've found in my practice is the more my patients can start to see and relate to themselves as that kind, wise, loving observer of themselves, the healthier they get.
Mm. So thank you for that clarification because there's a lot of people they get mixed up with that, and it's good that you informed us, and that's why I wanted to bring you into the show to make awareness about this whole elements and about Maya and about the therapies that you do, and how is that different from other therapeutic that we have come up with. Now, let me ask you one more thing, and I was going to ask you the second question is food is very important.
Mm-hmm.
What you is like what people they say, you if you put shit in you take shit out, right? But we want to be clean, and that's how you're trying to be, right? For that, uh for example, let me give you an example. There's a person who has a migraine headache. Now she has been taking a whole bunch of pills. She doesn't know
Mm-hmm.
what to do with it, but at the end of the her old age time, what's going to happen is her kidneys are going to fail, everything is going to fail, right? Which is not going to be good because those are medicines, right? What
Mm-hmm.
she has actually done is she has gone toxic, you know all to the herbs, to the natural element, and now it's been a month now that she has not had migraines. So do you think that the food actually plays a big part of a human body?
Oh, you bet. So, two things. First, with migraines, I think there's a big misunderstanding about headaches in the
Mm-hmm.
medical community
Mm-hmm.
and in society. And my own belief from my practice experience is that there's almost always an answer to headaches.
Mm-hmm.
People shouldn't have to just live with headaches. But I would say 90% of people that come in to see me that say they're having migraines, they're actually not migraines from a medical sense. They're muscle contraction headaches where their neck and muscles are too tight for too long.
Mm-hmm.
The classic migraine, where you get the warning, and and then it's half, usually only half your head, not your whole head.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that side of pain, that's almost always due to food allergies, in my experience.
Mm-hmm.
It's just finding the right food. And so maybe your friend, when she put herself on a natural diet,
Mm-hmm.
or organic diet, whole diet, probably eliminated the foods that she was allergic to.
Mm-hmm.
So very common foods that are triggers for migraines are obviously, gluten and dairy, and um, even conventional medicine has noticed that people react to chocolate or MS or MSG.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I was going to say MSM, but that's not right.
Mm-hmm.
MSG. And so yeah, a lot of times if you can clean up your diet, that's really important. But what's interesting is your body kind of knows what foods contain what micronutrients it might need. Like if you're short of riboflavin,
Mm-hmm.
how are you going to feel?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to feel hungry.
Yeah.
But if you tune in, you might actually see that you're hungry for specific things, and you can. So by learning how to listen, you can learn how to meet your body's day-to-day biochemical needs, because they might differ from day to day, again depending on what activities you're doing, what stresses you're facing, how much sleep you got. Your nutritional requirements might vary. So I don't think there's any published list of shoulds. Like
Mm.
that's why most diets don't work very well, I don't think. Is no published list of shoulds knows your moment to moment biochemical needs.
Mm-hmm.
But by learning how to listen, you can know those things.
So go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So diet's really important. Eliminating toxins. Getting the pesticides, herbicides out. Um, those. Getting rid of mold. I mean, all those things are I call them supportive. They're very helpful. They're. I mean, if you look at the American diet today compared to how we've eaten for the last couple 100,000 years,
Mm-hmm.
most of us are probably not really technically nutrient deficient. I mean,
Right.
and compared to a lot of people in other countries, that are living on $1 a day or whatever. So so I think most of what we're dealing with is not true nutritional deficiency,
Mm-hmm.
unless somebody's totally just living off of McDonald's French fries and nothing else.
Mm.
You know.
Yeah, that is true, Steve. So I have another question. So
Okay.
um, I migrated to the United States back in the 80s,
Okay.
90s. Okay. Now, just keep in mind, I never had any allergies. I never had any of that sort. All of a sudden, I have allergic to fruit, most of the fruit. Found out that it could be, I don't know, some chemicals on the fruit. How do we do that? I mean, I have cleaned out the fruit with vinegar to do that, but do you think it's environmental, or is it just that we are uh, key to pesticide and we're so used to it, or how does it, what do you think?
Well, that's a really good question, and people are starting to look into this, and I don't know if we know the answer quite yet. But I've been in practice long enough. Like I was in practice since the early '80s, um, and in that time, when I first started practicing, fibromyalgia was unheard of.
Mm-hmm.
And the only gluten sensitivity you saw were people that were true celiac
Mm-hmm.
people. But starting sometime in the 90s is when the rate of fibromyalgia started to go way up. The rate of this non-celiac gluten sensitivity starts going way up.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that is in the 90s is when um, they started using lots of Roundup, and they started genetically modifying foods to be Roundup ready. But then they also learned that they could use Roundup to kill the whole field before they want to harvest it so that it all dries out. They call it desiccate the crop.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, for example, now wheat is not Roundup ready. Roundup will kill wheat.
Mm-hmm.
So about a week before they want to harvest the wheat field, they'll spray it with Roundup, which kills it, lets it all dry out, and then they get a higher yield.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's like 32 crops now that they're doing that with.
Mm.
And so when you use Roundup to plant soybeans, for example, which are Roundup ready,
Mm-hmm.
they spray the Roundup first to kill all the weeds and then plant the soybeans.
Mm.
And so by the time you harvest the soybeans, there's no Roundup around.
Mm.
But the seeds are genetically modified, which is a separate issue.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we're getting a lot of Roundup and in our diets. And the issue is the glyphosate, which is the active ingredient in Roundup, was first patented as an antibiotic
Mm.
before it was patented as an herbicide.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so, what do antibiotics do to your friendly bacteria
Mm.
in your gut,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
And the bacteria in your gut have a huge impact on your immune system.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I was just reading the other day, they're starting to use fecal transplants to, it was treating some kind of autoimmune disease. It was really pretty fascinating, but I think more and more that's going to come down the pike. But so now we're getting all these people with gluten sensitivities that didn't used to have them, with dairy sensitivities, that with other food allergies, with autoimmune diseases. All the different autoimmune diseases are also going through the ceiling, and it very well could be that we're all just getting increased intestinal permeability and bacterial imbalances in our gut from these pesticides and herbicides in the food.
So, Steve, you brought up an excellent point regarding gluten free. So, there are three, four friends of mine that I grew up with, and all of a sudden they're just getting allergic to gluten. So,
Mhm.
there is a vast change, as you are saying, and I guess it's been going for a long time, but it looks like we're coming to a point that it's kind of a big bulldozer coming in that we don't know where to go, and I think nobody has the answer yet. Besides, don't eat certain items. Is that correct for now?
Well, I think it's really important to know your farmer.
Yeah.
So, if you can get involved in a community supported agriculture with a local organic farmer who's taking really good care of their soil,
Mm-hmm.
that can really help a lot, because the plants just don't have all the trace minerals they used to have because the soils are being so depleted,
Mm-hmm.
and that affects our vitality. and and even just taking minerals doesn't help as much because they're not usually in biological form and they're not in the right ratios, yada yada, right? So that helps a little, but it doesn't make up for bad food.
Mm.
And so yeah, if we all made choices to support our local farmers, encourage them to grow organically. um, we've learned so much about organic gardening. I used to live on a 20-acre farm, and we grew most of our own food for the last 20 years. So I
Mm-hmm.
learned quite a bit about those kinds of issues. Um, but that could be a big first step if people would just reach out and support their local farmers and encourage them to grow organically. I think that would help a lot with these um, these issues that we're experiencing with autoimmune disease, with allergies, that sort of with, and a lot of it could probably be traced back to imbalance in our intestinal bacteria.
Mm. So let me explain to the audience here. So during this pandemic time, and it's been a couple of years that I've been doing this, so pandemic is kind of the default answer for me, but I've been doing this for a couple of years now. I have built a garden in my backyard, okay, freshly organically made. Okay, now
Hmm.
how did I do that? Did I go to some regular soil that, as Steve's talking? No, I actually composted, and I got fresh soil out of that. And with that fresh soil, I created my own vegetables. And I'm telling you, there is a taste difference between the
Oh
regular
yeah.
farm and versus your natural. And I think that's what Steve is trying to talk about. But but the thing is that Steve is talking about farmers outside, but mind you guys, you have to start from home first. You have to start what you want before you start not complaining, but at least voice out to the public. So I started at home, and slowly that's what I'm trying to do, and trying to make my broadcasting out there for that. And Steve, I thank you for that. And I think if we have a clean environment, then I guess we're going to have a clean mind. And if we have a clean mind, then we have less stress. And when we have less stress, then I guess you're happy and I'm happy with this whole functional medicine that you have, and the therapy that you have. You think that's true on that?
Um, a big part. So I say that when somebody's having a symptom, that's a clue that something somewhere in their system is out of balance,
Mm,
right? And so that system includes those five Mayas and Atman. So something somewhere is out of balance.
mm,
I would have to say that in my practice, the most common imbalances that I end up working with, actually, when we get to the root, are what I call belief imbalances.
mm,
And that's where we've taken on, somewhere in our upbringing, we formed a limiting belief. And now we're bumping into those limitations. And that's what's causing the symptom.
mm, mm.
And so, for example, most people probably know what we've just been talking about.
Yeah.
Most people know that how you eat is really important.
Hmm.
But how many people can get themselves to actually eat the way they know is good for themselves?
Yeah, but Steve, but the problem is that, let's say
What's
you have four people in the family and only one person is doing it. We need everyone in the same page to do that. That's the only way to do and make it better. I feel.
Yeah, definitely. If you're the one preparing the food, you shouldn't be making a different meal for everybody. That'd be crazy
Exactly.
making.
Exactly. Exactly.
So hopefully the decision maker, the person doing the shopping and making up the menus and stuff gets on the page with eating organically. And I really agree with you too about you know growing as much of your own food as you can
Mm.
in your yard if you have one. And so we're doing the same thing. We moved off the farm, but we've got about 5 acres, and we put in about 30 raised beds, and now we didn't have dirt to fill them up with, so we're composting to fill them all up and actually
Yeah,
create.
Steve, you and I are very fortunate to have this, but there's not a lot of people who are fortunate, and I urge everyone to just find the right farmer that you get fruit and vegetables from. That is the key to
Yeah,
the clean body inside, to
farmers
avoid all the.
markets. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. And just avoid all the stress and the food allergy that we have, and less medicine the better. I think that's the key. Uh
yeah. The same thing happened to me. I think I got sensitive to stuff in the 90s. I didn't used to react. I could drink a whole quart of milk and not have any problem,
yeah.
and then I was getting so I couldn't even bend my fingers. They were still stiff and sore,
Mm,
and I could hardly move my shoulders, and then I quit those gluten and dairy. But then I found out that I could eat the gluten in France, for example, and not react.
mm,
Well, what's the difference? Well, I don't think they use the hybridized wheat there that has a lot more gluten in it, but they probably also don't spray their fields with Roundup before they harvest.
okay, yeah.
So, um, so a lot of people, if you are reacting to gluten in the United States, try uh, flour from Europe and see if you still react, because you might be able to tolerate that. And still be able to make a pie crust once in a while or something
Oh
like that.
yeah, that would be so much fun. I love
Europe,
pie crust.
European flour. Yeah, that's what we
European
do.
flour.
And
And where would we get that? Do we get that shipped out from UK or
well, we're fortunate here in Seattle. We've got a group of stores called Puget Consumer Co-op, and they
Mhm.
import organic flour from France and Italy.
Oh, nice.
You can just buy it off the shelf in that store. So maybe Whole Foods or some, if you have something local,
Mm.
health food store might be able to get the organic flour from Europe.
Oh, thank you, Steve. If actually don't find it, I'll contact you and have you ship something to me.
There you go.
Thank you so much. So, Steve, one last thing before we head out. So, any last words that you have for back to basics? That any last words?
Well, yeah, I think so. Getting back to basics, the most important thing you can do for yourself is to just see yourself for exactly how you are right now in this moment. And then just be kind to yourself about that. 'Cause that's what people's inner wisdom keeps telling them to do when we use the cranial work to contact. It says, yeah, you got this pain. Just be kind to yourself about it.
Mm,
Yeah, you got this problem in your relationship. Just be kind to yourself about it.
mm,
Because when we try to force ourselves to change,
mm.
we just get caught in a arms race with ourselves.
Yeah, that is correct.
And the only way out of that arms race, or I call it off the hamster wheel, is to see our truth just for it is and just be kind to ourselves. And then what's cool is the kindness will get in there and work any change that needs to happen
Mm,
in whatever. And it'll give you insights about what to do to make the changes that you need.
mm,
Um, but that's the only thing I would have to say in like 35 years of medical practice, the only thing I've actually seen actually heal someone is the practice of self compassion.
mm, mm.
So I think that's the most important takeaway.
Oh, cool. Thank you so much, Steve, for coming on my show. And I am so honored that you are here. And thank you again for accepting my invitation.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you. I appreciate your interview style. It's very good.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, guys, we spoke with Steve Hall today. We spoke about many different aspects and therapies and food and dietary, as we can call it. So at the end of the episode, I always come out with a quote, and here's a quote: "Set peace of mind as your highest goal, and organize your life around it." By Brian Tracy. I mean, just keep that in mind. Be happy, be kind, and put your mind in the highest goal for your life. And I think that's what we all do, and that's what we should do. So at the end of the episode, I always say, everything in life goes back to basics, and that's what we did today. So stay blessed. See you next week. Keep on commenting, and stay blessed. Take care. Bye. God bless. Next week's episode on Back to
right?
Basics.
Because work is part of life. So
Yeah.
you can't have a balance between a piece and a whole,
Hmm.
right? So what we really talk about when we're talking about life, work-life balance is how does one set priorities? How do you meet the needs of yourself, of your family? How do you get out of life what you need while having to work and to do dishes
Mm-hmm.
and to drive kids places
Mm-hmm.
and do all of those other things that are part of life? So it's not so much about figuring out what part does work take on. It's about figuring out how do we prioritize something every single day.
So let's